At exactly 18:11 and 32 seconds Eastern Daylight Time, on July 13, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, a lone actor positioned on a nearby commercial roof fired 8 rounds into a crowded campaign rally. Those 8 shots exacted an immediate human toll. One rally attendee, Corey Comparator, was killed. 2 others, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, were critically injured, and the primary protectee, former President Donald Trump, was wounded in the upper right ear. This image shows the weapon utilized by the 20-year-old shooter, an AR-15 style rifle, specifically a DPMS Panther Arms model chambered in 5.56mm, equipped with an unmagnified red dot sight. The tactical response on the ground was incredibly swift. Within 4 seconds of the first shot, a local emergency services unit operator returned fire, striking the shooter's rifle stock. Just 12 seconds later, a Secret Service counter-sniper fired a single fatal shot, neutralizing the threat exactly 16 seconds after the attack began. A gunman armed with a rifle accessed an elevated, unobstructed position barely 400 feet from a presidential candidate. This vulnerability forced law enforcement into a reactive firefight, demonstrating a collapse in operational architecture that preceded the first shot. The assassination attempt resulted from a cascading collapse of operational architecture. The security plan failed across 3 distinct axes: site planning, the delineation of agency responsibilities, and line-of-sight mitigation. To understand how this happened, we have to look at the geography of the vulnerability. The security map was divided into zones. The primary secure perimeter contained the stage. The outer perimeter completely excluded the adjacent American Glass Research, or AGR, complex. Leaving this elevated complex outside the secured area was the foundational flaw, creating an unmitigated staging ground adjacent to the venue. Once the event was underway, correcting that physical perimeter flaw required seamless communication. Instead, information silos completely paralyzed law enforcement's ability to share critical threat data in real time. You can deploy highly trained counter-sniper teams and tactical operators, but those advanced assets are neutralized before they even take their positions if the underlying perimeter planning is structurally broken. The AGR complex presented an obvious, highly lethal physical threat. It offered multiple interconnected rooftops with an elevated trajectory pointing directly at the stage, resting between 400 and 450 feet away, well within the effective range of a standard rifle. Despite this clear threat, there was severe operational ambiguity between the Secret Service and local law enforcement regarding who actually owned the AGR building. Neither agency had clear, documented responsibility for securing the grounds. Because local snipers believed their primary role was crowd overwatch rather than perimeter defense, they positioned themselves inside the second floor of the AGR buildings, looking toward the stage. This left the roof directly above their heads, completely unmonitored. This image shows the view from Secret Service Counter-Sniper Team 2. A large tree's dense foliage completely obstructed their line of sight to the easternmost portion of the AGR roof, the exact area where the shooter staged his attack. This physical blind spot was recognized by advanced teams during site preparation, days before the rally, yet it was left entirely unmitigated on the day of the event. When you combine ambiguous agency roles, the structural exclusion of the building, and unmitigated visual blind spots, you create a perfect staging area for a hostile actor. Preparations began hours prior. At 9:30, he purchased a ladder. After 11, he bought 50 rounds of ammunition, arriving at the site by 15:35. At 15:50, the suspect successfully flew a reconnaissance drone over his eventual firing position for 11 minutes. That 11-minute flight went entirely undetected by the Secret Service, because their counter-unmanned aerial systems technology was completely non-operational during that window. The failure stemmed from 2 specific issues. The operator had received inadequate training to troubleshoot the equipment, and severe degradation in the local cellular network prevented the system from properly coming online. Moving forward to 1714, local snipers stationed inside the AGR building observed the suspect pacing the grounds below them. They noted he was acting suspiciously and using a golf rangefinder to scope out the stage. Recognizing the threat, these local officers successfully photographed the suspect and began circulating the images among their local tactical teams via text message. Because federal technological safety nets failed, early threat detection relied entirely on local human intelligence on the ground. But that accurate, critical intelligence was about to hit a severe communication bottleneck. Law enforcement operated across highly fragmented radio networks. At 1744, a commander reported the suspect. Due to degraded cell service, the photos reached the Secret Service at 1751, but never crossed the final gap to the protective detail. By 1800 hours, the local police response was escalating. Multiple officers abandoned their assigned traffic posts to physically hunt for the suspect based on the circulated photos. Yet the primary protectees detail remained entirely unaware of the active search occurring just outside their perimeter. Rigid communication silos effectively quarantine life-saving intelligence just yards away from the specific agents who possess the authority to extract a protectee from danger. At 1805, the suspect bypassed his purchased ladder and utilized an air conditioning unit to pull himself up onto the AGR roof complex. 3 minutes later, at 1808, a local police officer spotted him and made a frantic radio broadcast. "Someone's on the roof." This triggered a desperate search around the building. At 1811, a local township officer was physically hoisted up to the roofline by a colleague, trying to get eyes on the top. As the officer's head cleared the roof edge, the suspect immediately spotted him and swung his rifle toward the officer. With both hands gripping the ledge, the officer had to let go, dropping 8 feet to the ground below and severely injuring his ankle. That direct confrontation instantly collapsed the suspect's timeline. Knowing he had been discovered by armed law enforcement, the shooter repositioned and opened fire on the rally just seconds later. The culmination of unmitigated terrain and technological failure and siloed communication stripped law enforcement of their tactical initiative. Instead of executing a proactive interdiction, they were forced into a reactive engagement at the worst possible moment. The immediate operational fallout forced drastic changes onto campaign security protocols. Moving forward, the Secret Service mandated enhanced protective measures, requiring the use of heavily fortified ballistic glass enclosures around the podium for outdoor political rallies. The institutional consequences were severe. The breach triggered intense bipartisan congressional hearings, exposing the systemic gaps to the public and culminating in the rapid resignation of the director of the Secret Service. Beyond policy, the attack sent massive political ripple effects through the election cycle. The survival of the candidate, captured in instantly iconic photographs moments after the shooting, deeply galvanized his political base. It also shifted the discourse of the 2024 election. Subsequent polling revealed widespread public skepticism regarding the basic competency of federal protective agencies, with over half the country expressing the belief that the shooter did not act alone. What began as a micro-level operational failure, a mismanaged perimeter and dropped communications in rural Pennsylvania, rapidly escalated into a macro-level political and institutional crisis for the federal government. Layered security only works if it functions as a cohesive net. In Butler, the holes in the physical perimeter, the technology, and the communications aligned, allowing a single threat to pass through each independent layer. Advanced tactical assets were plentiful on the ground. Heavily armed snipers, specialized tactical teams, and surveillance drones were physically present at the site. The bitter irony is that local officers successfully generated accurate human intelligence, identified the threat, and circulated photographs well before the shooting. The individuals succeeded, but the architecture failed to integrate their data. You can have the most sophisticated tactical advantages in the world, but they are entirely neutralized if your fundamental site architecture and basic communication networks fail to connect them. Effective protection depends on the invisible connective tissue of communication. Without it, even overwhelming federal assets cannot act as a single cohesive unit.